Welcome to the first episode of 2025 of Conduct Detrimental. I'm Dan Lust with my trusty co-pilot, Mike Kravchenko. Mike, welcome to the new year. How you feeling?
I feel good. Happy New Year. New year with some crazy things I'm sure to come in our sports law world. And yeah, I'm just excited to reflect on the year that was and maybe look a little bit ahead. And first episode of 2025 is always exciting. So appreciate everyone.
Mike, always a pleasure having you. We were planning to record last week, and then what happens is that life happens, because I thought that my lovely wife, my lovely family were going to give me a nice chunk of time to record a podcast during our trip to Disney in Florida. Guess what, Mike? It did not happen. And then I thought, you know what? We make the rules here, and I'm like, I feel like sometimes my kids make the rules, but I make the rules on this podcast. And I said, you know what? Let's kick this to next week. And then what happened is that I walked probably 28,000 steps on day one and around like 30,000 steps on day two at Disney. And I'm in this state of mind where I need a vacation from my vacation. Disney, I love Disney. And those OG listeners of podcasts, I've been to Disney probably, I want to say 4 times in the last like 20, it's right around 2 years. Like, we go a lot. I have a daughter, 5, and another daughter that's 3. They love Disney. It's the best time to go. Disney, man. Disney is just exhausting. It is just so emotionally, physically taxing. If I don't go to Disney, listen, this is a reminder, okay? Anybody, you can hold me in check, Mike. Any listeners can hold me in check. I want to put a moratorium on Disney for the next 2 years. I don't need to go again. I don't. I really don't. My kids, my oldest hit the 40-inch mark. That's like to go on Tower of Terror and all those big rides. And my youngest, 38 inches. She's like right around there. I just don't need to go back. I'm Disneyed out. And I love Disney, most magical place on earth, all good. It was really cool being there on New Year's and Epcot and going all different places. I've done everything that Disney could possibly offer, and I'm just done. I think that's okay. I think it's okay to say that out loud. My wife doesn't listen to the podcast, so she won't hear this. And I'm just Disneyed out, Mike. It was a good time, and I'm going to have a good time. My kids have a good time. I just don't want to go there anymore. I don't want to go there.
That's fair. I mean, at least give it, like for my family, I went when I was very little, and then again, like right before high school. So I feel like that like 7 to 10 years is like good. Go do other things, find other places to go, and then give it one more shot at Disney, because I can't imagine Disney during the holiday season too.
Without getting too much into it, Disney is like when the fireworks and the New Year's, it's like very crowded, and when you're pushing kids around a stroller, just like, I don't know, it's a lot of adults there. So how about this? I think the adults should stay home, and like maybe I'll come back. It's got to be a cap on the kids. They got to be like got to take some like numbers. It's kind of like a fire hazard. There's like a lot of people there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The real problem, and again, I know I'm going to break this rule, so I'm trying to have myself be held in check. But my wife's grandma just lives too close to Orlando for us not to go, and we're obviously going to visit her. And the kids want to go. It's a whole thing. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna look back on the year that was, from the conduct detrimental perspective, as well as from the general sports law landscape, and then some personal stuff. So, Mike, we kind of looked at the episodes we did this year. We looked at the big topics in sports law. There have been years in the past where we've had some like real meat, and we could do like a top 10 list. I don't really think that was the case this year. I think the college space in general has been blowing up. So we're going to distill college to maybe 2-3 stories that have been pretty big. That's going to be the House settlement, the Dartmouth unionization case. There's a big update this past week. And this general sense of conference realignment. And obviously we're in the middle of college ball season, so we'll cover those 3. And then on the betting side, I still think, and obviously you guys know, we talk a lot about the betting space. I think the Ohtani story should have been the biggest story of the year, but baseball swept that under the rug. I truthfully feel that. So we'll talk about Ohtani, we'll talk about Jontay Porter, we'll talk about the next kind of phase of betting stories, a little bit in the college space, which is still being unpacked. And then, we'll see what's to spare, but I want to cover those 2. I have some other stuff on my list. Mike, does that sound fair? Does that sound like a fair agenda for today?
No, it's good. I think that's perfect.
Fair. Okay. can I just get one thing off my chest before we get started? Because you know,
Please.
sometimes we have the agenda, and then sometimes I just feel like I need to say things that are really important in my little world, and I think for our listeners it's important. You and I talk about bets. I've had some pretty good recommendations for the year. Jaylen Brown, finals MVP bet. A couple years ago, I had the rough, and that was, I think Jaylen Brown was 6-1. I had the Caitlin Clark bet with you. Mike, what was the hit on Caitlin Clark? What was that? I think that was 5-1, 4-1. I think it was 4-1. Caitlin Clark to lead the WNBA in threes, right? I think it was 4-1.
I'm not sure, but
It was
I
a
don't know
lot.
what the
It
odds were,
wasn't.
but it was good. It was real
Yeah,
good.
yeah. It was 4 or 5-1. I had Rafa Nadal a couple years ago. I took podcast listeners, told them to take because of the whole Novak Djokovic vac situation. And here's the one that I told everybody in my life about, and I feel confident that it's going to hit. And no, I'm not talking about the cat, 55-1 that I still think is going to hit. I'm talking about the Sam Darnold comeback player of the year bet. I was so confident in this. I said, listen, I don't know if the guy's going to win, but a starter on the Vikings are a good team, a good franchise. I think you can get this in. So some of my friends got it at 40-1. Some of my friends got it at like 25-1. I'm in at 25-1. And Mike, I bet a lot of money on this. A lot of money for me is a 3-digit bet. Okay. I'm not going to say how much is a lot of money. So what happened was, the first 5-6 weeks of the season, do you remember? Darnold was fucking killing it. And I don't mean to curse the podcast, but we're going to have to for this. And then this random guy from the Associated Press, Rob Motti. Do you remember this guy, Rob Motti?
I do. I remember that big time.
He came out with a tweet and said, in most years, Sam Darnold would be a contender for comeback player of the year. But this year, the Associated Press changed their guidelines, and it has to be someone that was injured. Therefore, Sam Darnold can't win. Mike, do you know what has happened in the last, month, 6 weeks since I brought this up?
Has he been removed? Is that even an option anymore?
He was removed. Sam Darnold was removed. And then what happened is the listeners of this podcast, just kidding, more realistically, Minnesota Vikings fans and the NFL community at large kind of said, you know what? That was a stupid rule. That was a stupid tweet. Sam Darnold had went from basically betting favorite, which I thought was going to clear a lot of money. And then he went off the board. And I was ready to evoke a war against Rob Motti. And people can go through the archives and find that episode when I was going to kill Rob Motti. Not really, just, metaphorically kill Rob Motti. And what has happened since is Sam Darnold has gone on an epic run. The Minnesota Vikings are in a primetime game this weekend against I think it's the Lions, Mike.
The Lions, yeah, fighting for the division.
Fighting for the division. Mike, check me if I think they're both 14-2.
Yep.
Right now, both 14-2.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, whoever wins ends up as the 1 seed and the division winner, and then whoever loses ends up as the 5 seed and a wild card.
I knew there was such an injustice around the Sam Darnold comeback player of the year. I've been waiting, and now I didn't have to do that much work. Twitter is all on it. Sam Darnold went from basically the favorite minus 200 when before Rob Motti put his head in, off the board. You couldn't even bet him anymore. It was just he was not eligible for the award. And then slowly but surely he creeped back up. Mike, do you know what Sam Darnold's odds are to win comeback player of the year at the time of this recording?
It can't be. I don't. I really couldn't even guess it. It's got to be in the minus, no?
I'm going to tell you. It is minus 110. He is in a coin flip with Joe Burrow to win comeback player of the year. And I'll tell you, if the Bengals don't make the playoffs and the Vikings do, I think we're going to clear. So all of our listeners that were, I got some texts, I got some emails. Your boy Sam Darnold's not doing that well. If he's doing well, he's going to get screwed. We are back in the running. Okay. So the big theme of 2024 was betting on this podcast because we became kind of a betting podcast. I know we used to have a sponsor of the betting podcast, and I'm like, let's just talk betting so I don't have to worry about which lines I'm talking about. Talking about the lines that I want to talk about. And Mike, that will bring us to our first topic. Okay. These are the betting scandals in 2024. Mike, I remember sitting with you and going through this Ohtani complaint, and it was the federal complaint against the translator. Mike, remind me of the translator's name. Do you have it?
Yeah, Ippei Mizuhara.
You had that ready to go.
Oh, yeah. This is, one of the top stories of the
dome?
year.
You did not?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stories of the year.
Okay. So for those that don't know, and I covered this recently in my sports betting class. It was very heavily featured on my sports law betting final, of which I have to grade this weekend, which is going to be miserable, but I'm all here for it. Shohei Ohtani, his best friend, his translator, literally the person that was his voice to the outside world, undisputed was a degenerate gambler. Undisputed was into gamblers for millions of dollars. Mike, what if I told you that Shohei Ohtani allegedly had no knowledge of his best friend's gambling problem? Do you think that's believable or not believable?
I will never believe that. Doesn't matter what you tell me.
I agree with you. Like, common sense sometimes tells you something. Like, obviously, when you and I will sometimes, like, and me as a gambler, like, I'll think through a lot of bets, and then I'm like, sometimes the results, I'm like, that was the most obvious thing. The most obvious thing in the world is that and this is my opinion, okay, it's not fact, it's just what I believe, is that if two people are best friends and they spend a lot of time together, and I remember I recall there being some type of comment from Shohei Ohtani thinking, like, this is like a brother, it's a family member, it's not even my interpreter. There is no way that he didn't know how much gambling. Like, you hear how much I talk about gambling on the podcast. All of my friends in my life, my wife, even my kids know that I gamble. They say, Daddy, I tell them, Daddy watches sports to make money. That's what I say sometimes, right? There is no world that Shohei Ohtani did not know about this. And I bring this up in the context. Mike, do you remember the story that Ippei Mizuhara originally gave to ESPN?
Actually, well, originally they were saying it had to do with Ohtani, obviously.
It had everything to do with Ohtani.
Like his direct involvement, though.
I love quizzing you on the podcast because, like, you know I'm going to give you the answer. And, like, I like when you give these half-hearted attempts. Sometimes I just wish you would just, like, go for it. Just give a wrong answer so I could just be like, no, that was not correct. No. So Shohei basically, Ippei Mizuhara, basically ESPN gets some intel that they're investigating Ippei in connection with this big bookie being busted on the West Coast. And Ippei sits down with ESPN and does a long-form interview. I think it was like 2 hours, maybe more than that, but it was like multiple hours. And he tells a story that he got into really bad with gambling. He tells Shohei Ohtani about how bad he was into debt, which makes sense because if I had a multi-billion, $100 million friend and I got into the issue with bookies or something like that, like, probably going to tell my rich friend, like, oh, makes sense. Yeah, help me out. Listen, like, get out of this. Shohei Ohtani has more money than God. Like, I don't know, something he can get out of it. And he tells this whole story to ESPN. And the crux of the story is that Shohei Ohtani learned about this gambling debt and decided to pay off the gambling debt, and the money came through his account. I believe that story. It makes sense. Mike, I have another question for you. You're Mr. Common Sense here. You ready for this?
Yeah.
If Shohei Ohtani got into debt, gambling debt that badly, and he has his brother is Shohei, they know each other for years, blah, blah. Do you think that Ippei is likely to tell Shohei about this gambling debt in an effort to have it paid off?
I don't see why not.
What percentage chance do you think? And we don't know Ippei, we don't know Shohei. We're just common sense, man. What do you think? Would you put that at 50%, 75%, maybe?
I like that 75.
Okay. So in the first hypothetical you and I just did, I think it's almost impossible that Shohei doesn't know that he's gambling. Just almost impossible. So I'd say 95% chance Shohei Ohtani knows. Now, I'd say, what do you like, Mike? 75%, 50%?
75.
75%. I think that's right. I think it's probably in that territory. 65, 75% chance that Shohei was told about this gambling debt and paid him off. Okay? Paid off the gambling debt. That's, again, my opinion. So we've now talked about two factors that we think are pretty likely, right? One is, I think, 90%. The other is 65, 75%. Now, okay, let's move on. I mean, that's the story that details, and I guess I'll give you this last piece, and then we'll kind of move on. So this story is told, okay? Story is told to ESPN for over hours and hours. They're ready to run the story, and then ESPN gets a call from someone else in Shohei Ohtani's team, and they said, everything that Ippei Mizuhara just told you was a lie. It wasn't true. And here's the real story. The real story is that Ippei Mizuhara stole all the money from Shohei's accounts and pretended to be him on the phone and did unauthorized wire transfers. Okay. Now, Mike, that's the story that everyone's running with. Ippei Mizuhara is going to, is serving time, all this fun stuff that's going to be on the horizon. Mike, what percentage chance do you think that Ippei Mizuhara did not clear this initial story with the rest of Shohei's team before he spoke to ESPN? That's my question to you.
That's a 50-50 toss-up for me personally.
Okay. What Shohei's team essentially claimed is that Ippei went rogue and just told the story. I don't believe that either. So, I'm not saying that the story that Ippei told the first time is necessarily true. A lot of things could be true. But I just think that we have so quickly moved on from what could have been the biggest story in baseball history because we were just told to. And obviously Shohei went on and, Dodgers won the World Series. Shohei had a great thing. And everyone just moved on. At some point, the real truth will come out on the story. Not to say, again, I don't know. I am so shocked at how quickly as a public we moved on because Shohei was the golden boy of baseball. And Pete Rose is still a story we talk about 40 years later. The Black Sox, again, we talk about 100 years later. And Shohei, we've just moved on. And now it's the end of 2024. And, this should be the A-level story of the year. Instead, it's just like a footnote. Hey, remember that time for a hot second we thought Shohei was involved in a gambling scandal on opening day of 2024? And now no one talks about it. So I tell my class, I tell you, I tell my listeners, I tell my little kids, right? Like, just because someone says something is true doesn't mean it's true. Like, you know me, Mike, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not a crazy person. Like I maybe we have anti-vaxxers listening to this podcast and they don't like me anymore. Cool. It's all good. In these big circles for sports in particular, where we don't control the narrative and these leagues are all private and the owners are privatized. Like, we don't have a right for freedom of information. These are not governmental actors that have a duty to the public. These are just sports leagues that sometimes are incentivized, more often than not, financially incentivized to not give us the whole truth and to give us a different story. I think this has happened a number of occasions, like the Tim Donaghy thing we talk about in my class a lot. That's the ref that went rogue. So I think, at least for betting purposes, the way that baseball handled the story is somehow they squeezed through this issue that should have been a black mark on baseball. It's just a footnote. I think is just shocking. So to me, that is the biggest shock of 2024, that this thing just slid. They threw this thing under the rug. They threw it in the closet, never to be heard from again. So that, Mike, is both my biggest story of 2024 and the thing to look forward to most. I think in the years to come, who knows if 2026 moving forward. But I don't think we've heard the last of this Shohei Ohtani betting scandal, nor do I think we've heard the last of betting scandals in Major League Baseball.
I hope not, because, obviously, like you said, it's MLB's golden boy. It's someone that just went 50-50 and was breaking records and won a World Series. And they, of course, have every reason to not persecute Ohtani in the public eye. And, I get that, but it's definitely, I'm hoping as a baseball fan that they look a little bit more into this, or someone looks more into this. I mean, it's $16 million. It's not nothing. It's not, a bench player. It's the number one player in the world, tens of millions of dollars, and a player that, is marketed as the golden boy. He's perfect. There's nothing wrong with him. He's so nice. He does everything perfect. So it's like, I don't know. I guess we'll see. Because, I think it's unfair that, every time a player, it seems like every time a player, deals with something like this or is called out or accused of something like this, it is a way longer thing and they actually get investigated. But, the fact that this was just pushed under the rug is pretty crazy. And, we'll talk about another, professional athlete that wasn't pushed under the rug. And I think it's a perfect, what is someone at the top of the game and someone maybe not, what the leagues do.
I'll give it back to you. I don't think we need to spend that much time in it. I think it's just, sometimes this happens. It's like, we've talked about this with Matt Ariza, the Bills kicker, once upon a time. There are athletes that are, depending on their stature of certain teams or the position they play, like if you're a punter, you're going to be treated much differently than a quarterback. If you're an undrafted player, you're going to be treated much differently than a player that's drafted in the first round. Matt Ariza was a punter for the Bills that was accused of something. He was later completely acquitted of any wrongdoing, and he was cut by his team. And then you move to the hardwood that is the National Basketball Association, that recently dealt with this Tim Donaghy scandal. They've dealt with other scandals in the past on the betting side. And Jontay Porter is a player I, I I'm not going to offend anybody. I'm sure Jontay Porter does not listen to this podcast, that nobody cares about. That the story with Jontay Porter when the criminal charges came out was involved with organized crime, and there were millions of dollars being bet on Jontay Porter props, even though he was profiting very little off it. And that's just a trend that we've seen years over years. The Tim Donaghy scandal, the college sports point shaving scandals. So Jontay Porter doesn't matter to the NBA. He's a two-way player. He's a G League guy. Ban him for the NBA. It doesn't really move the needle, but it sends a lesson, sends a message, right? And NBA's bottom line doesn't really change if Jontay Porter plays or doesn't play. Baseball's bottom line does change with Shohei Ohtani. He's one of the most marketable players in sports history, not baseball history. He's an international superstar. So the dichotomy of these two things, right? Like, they were both betting scandals. They're both organized crime or bookies being involved behind the scenes. So, we don't have to spend that much time on it, but I think you are right. The NBA sends a message, and baseball sends a different message, that if you're important enough, we will do everything in our power to protect you. That's what, and without getting into so much behind the wheel, and this was before I was involved in the podcast, but Dan Wallach, in a different iteration of conduct detrimental, he made his bread or made a lot of noise in the sports law space, really hitting on the Deflategate and Tom Brady saga. That's when the NFL did the opposite. They took their star golden boy and really tried to make an example out of him. So it's different. These stories are all handled differently. Just remember, like, we as the sports public don't need to know the whole truth here. And there's sometimes agendas being fought behind the scenes. Like, I would think, right? Like, baseball makes more money as a whole for the owners if Shohei Ohtani is playing. And I think as a whole, Tom Brady, if the Patriots are cheating, the league as a whole wanted him to be persecuted. So I think that always depends, right? Like, you got to always follow the money. And the owners, the other 20 or 31 NFL owners, didn't want Patriots to cheat. The other 29 teams in Major League Baseball want Shohei Ohtani, that international market, to go up and up and up. And then Jontay Porter, nobody cares about. So, that makes sense. And again, I don't think it's a coincidence that money seems to be correct in each of these occasions in terms of the league's handling. But that was 2024. We have two, some very big gambling stories, and as a big gambler over here, I enjoy following them. Mike, is that fair? Am I missing anything else on the gambling front? Oh, college. Didn't you have something to add on college?
Oh, in terms of the betting?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of a college issue earlier this year, if you're referring to Temple basketball, and that their leading scorer actually was involved in betting in his own games, which is absolutely, incredible. It's like we're saying, it's trickling down from league to league down to college now. So, it's just another, like, to not go super deep into it, it's just another Hysier Miller, I believe, was the gentleman that was allegedly betting on his own games and manipulating outcomes. And so it's just bringing more attention to the integrity issues in sports, especially as sports betting continues to get legalized across the country. So I don't know. I mean, there's almost a little over half the country, I think, has legal sports betting at this point. So I'm sure this won't be really the end of it, but yeah, I mean, now that it's going into college, that Temple UAB men's basketball game, just to give a little bit of an understanding of what we're talking about, they had that firm understanding and monitors of the betting market, and that there was unusual line movement, and especially with Temple basketball, there's probably not going to be a tremendous amount of gambling happening on a team like that. But ESPN revealed that the federal authorities have been investigating Hysier Miller. So I think it's going to be interesting. We'll see a lot more coming out of college, especially from some players maybe that aren't at the highest level, getting those NIL deals and trying to somewhat, make up for it, in other ways. So I think this is definitely not the end of college, scandals when it comes to sports betting. And yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, what's to come with that.
I'll give a prediction. And this is not on any inside information. It's just something that seems very easily manipulatable. This has not come up yet. I have not heard this in any way, shape, or form, but you are correct. We've alluded to it. The college space, all the money being put in, there's so many eyeballs paying attention to the sport. There's a market that I like to, mess around in, and that's generally on the professional side. I don't really bet college sports futures. There's just too much variance, and from league to league, and a lot of sample sizes. The transfer portal is such a hot button topic in college sports. You can have, and I'm watching a lot of these bowl games. And you have so many guys put their name in the transfer portal. All the while, you do have like futures on like 2025 college football champion, right? Like, same thing goes in basketball, right? Like, I think at some point, I don't know again when it is, but I just think it's very easily manipulatable. Players' ability to opt out of bowl games because of the transfer portal, because of the NFL draft, or the NBA draft, or vice versa, or just transferring. That's something very squarely within the player's control, and something that we're seeing more and more, right? Transfers and players sitting out just to preserve, their draft stock. It's not something that we had to deal with 10 years ago. I sense that those bets are going to be the ones that we should be paying very close attention to for suspicious betting activity. Watch it very closely. Obviously, the criminal courts are involved. Prosecutors are paying attention to these suspicious betting patterns. And I think we should as well. So, as someone, I work very closely in the college sports space. I hear a lot of things. I try to tell the schools and the collectives and the athletes that I work with about the stuff on the horizon. And I think that's something that just, and I tell my friends that work in betting. I've talked about my friends that work in the betting space that they should be paying close attention to those particular lines. I'm sure they are, with or without me. But yeah, I think that's a spot that people should like going classes to. Paying close attention to. That was a tongue twister. Okay, Mike, let's move on to our second big ticket item, and then see where it goes. Okay, Mike, speaking of college, college sports space is where I think we've had the most change in any one particular sport. The two big items, and I'm, I think we predicted every year. We predicted in 2022 the college space will be big, the college space will be big, and guess what? Like, we're right, it was big every single year. So we go through our archives, and I was looking at some old episodes we did with Mike Lawson and Taryn and Jason Morin and Evan Mattel and Stephanie Weissenberger, some OGs of conduct, and we always predict the college sports space will be big. And guess what? It is. Speaking of, we got a request. We will bring on some of our OGs to talk about where they are. We have some OGs that OG listeners that are like, what happened to Stephanie Weissenberger? Why isn't she on the podcast? And I know we talked about it on a recent episode. We will do it. We will talk about origin stories, all that fun stuff. We started this podcast years ago as a way for people to keep up to date on the sports space and try to help you progress in their careers. And we're due for a recap show. I do it in my sports law class. I bring all the OG people back to talk about the careers. We don't do it on the podcast. So I think we should, Mike, right? I think we should.
I agree 100%. People ask me about it, and I'm like, yes. I don't know. That's definitely, a Dan question. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, we just have to do it. I've just been like, so funny. Like I don't know. I don't really sleep that much, but now I don't sleep because my kids aren't sleeping. So all this different free time, I had time to do stuff for and plan the podcast out. And, you used to have a lot more free time when you have kids. You lose all that free time. So Mike, you are the producer. You just have to tell me what we're doing, when we're doing it, why we're doing it. And I will say, okay, you are in charge now. You're the executive producer of this podcast.
Deal. It's on, it's in recording. It's here.
Okay. Okay. Let's move over to the college space. We'll do this quick because speaking of me not being in charge of my own life, my kids are going to scream and they're going to come in here in like half an hour. Got to be concise. We got to be good. You ready for this, Mike? Ready for this?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Okay. House versus NCAA, a case we talked about a lot on this podcast this year, also last year. I've talked about my classes. I've had guest speakers in. House versus NCAA, we didn't think it was going to be finalized necessarily within the year of 2024 and has not. It's still kind of kicking around. We're looking for objections in the year 2025. Again, not rooting for them. I have friends on both sides of the aisle, but we talk about it. That is the first element, the first domino in the revenue sharing pie. Athletes being able to earn money directly from their schools. And that is something that is a complete game changer. It's a game changer in the structure of college sports as we know it, in terms of collectives being able to pay, in terms of sponsorship money coming in terms of holding kids accountable, in terms of whether kids go in the transfer portal. School being able to pay is a complete and absolute game changer. among a number of items addressed in the House vs. NCAA, the fact that athletes will share in, it's approximately $20 million a year. That number goes up every few years. That is a very huge development that's happening in college sports. It's on the horizon. Every time I speak to a collective or anybody in the college space, agents, I say, this is the rule right now. It will probably change, once the House passes, but we don't know for sure. But the House versus NCAA case is a huge one. The legal fees associated with House versus NCAA, as we spoke about in recent podcasts, are massive. It is a huge, huge, monumental move in the college space, and one that will be basically getting multiple chapters in my next iteration of my College Sports in a Nutshell book, which is available for purchase, link in my bio on Instagram. Mike, do you have a copy? There it is. Yeah, Mike, I'll turn it to you. Thoughts on House versus NCAA? What was, I think, the true biggest legal case of 2024.
Yeah, this is something that even, working at a university, people, come up to and ask me about all the time, because it's, it impacts everybody. And yeah, any Division I school, especially, it's really a huge deal that they're now able to allocate some of their athletic revenue directly to the athletes. So there's that revenue sharing model, but of course that looks differently from top to bottom of the Power Fives, or like for myself, I work at Stony Brook, University. So very different type of Division I program there than in Alabama. So I think it's a victory for, athletes' rights, and obviously it's not being seen as just students, because they're not. That's been obvious for a very long time now. So I think it was great that they got over that initial hump, that people do agree that there needs to be something in place for the athletes to be employees. But I'm super interested to see how the bottom line handles it, at the lower Division I, but also I'm interested to see things like health insurance, if there's going to be collective bargaining or any other worker protections, because those are things that now you're removing. You're removing the amateur model, and if you're going to say these people are employees and they're grown adults, they're 18 plus, I'm interested to see where all the, the insurances come in and everything else that comes along with being an employee. I mean, the same that you and I would get as well, if we were employees. So that's really what I'm looking towards in the House settlement, the extras, and not just the headline stuff of, now so-and-so at Michigan is going to get, $20 million of the revenue that they get. I think it's going to be real interesting to see. And I think I hope that we'll get something within the first quarter of 2025 to maybe talk about on the podcast.
Well, we may, obviously we're going to follow it. The only thing, the carve out, which we've said anytime House comes up, and I remember I was listening recently when I was sitting at the very chaotic Disney pool at the Dolphin Hotel. You ever been to the Dolphin Hotel?
No.
It's like one of these places near Epcot. It was a nice deal. It wasn't it was just very kid friendly, we'll say. But anyway, not relevant. Sometimes I bring stuff up that has no relevance, just where my ADD brain goes. I was listening to one of the our old episodes that we had done, and we were cautioning people that, hey, the settlement might not go through because of the objections, right? Okay, that's number one. Number two, the settlement might not go through because of this pending unionization issue from Dartmouth. And there was language that was present in the House settlement that said, to the extent that the unionization becomes prevalent across college sports and a collective bargaining can be agreed to, and I'm paraphrasing, it doesn't say this exactly in the settlement agreement, but it was certainly a carve out for this settlement being, for lack of a better term, extinguished or rendered moot if unionization became a big factor across college sports. And at that time, people were looking very closely at Dartmouth basketball. So as we sit here on January 3rd, this episode, I think, will come out. Mike, when will this episode come out? You want to put this out on Monday?
Oh, I was just going to put it out for the weekend.
Let's put it out for the weekend. Let's give the people what they
give
want.
People a whole weekend to listen to it.
If we had recorded this episode about 2 weeks ago, we would say, Dartmouth looks like they're still going to try this unionization effort. We were joined on our last episode by Amanda Kristovich, and she made the bold prediction that the composition of the NLRB was going to change the unionization question. It would probably hurt unionization efforts. And you know what? Amanda is smart. Amanda is great. Amanda is batting 1,000 on this podcast in the last month because Amanda nailed it. Dartmouth rescinded their petition to unionize, and they said it's, I don't know if they gave a statement that was so explicit, but as Amanda predicted, the composition of the NLRB under the Trump administration likely would not create a conducive situation for Dartmouth men's basketball to unionize, and perhaps would create some really bad precedent for the next sport that wanted to unionize. So there are other petitions out there. I think USC football is the other main one that's kicking around. The Johnson versus NCAA case is another case focused on unionization rights. But Dartmouth basketball is no more. We talk about Northwestern football as being a footnote in history. They almost unionized. They didn't. I remember this very well. It's the time when the podcast was alive and well. When Penn State almost unionized, and we had Jason Stahl was on the podcast. I was with him in Vegas about 2 months ago talking about that. So we talked about Penn State as a footnote. Penn State football as a footnote in history. And now Dartmouth basketball will be another footnote in history. What could have been, again, not that this is a political podcast, but if you had a different National Labor Relations Board, a different NLRB, maybe Dartmouth basketball becomes the kind of the watershed moment in the unionization conversation. Does not. So I think that is another big story. As much as we, and I always put up odds at Conduct Detrimental Resorts World Casino. I don't know if I ever put odds on Dartmouth. Someone can check me if that's the case. We in hindsight probably should have tied it somewhat to the election. We did not do that. And now we're sitting here in 2025 and Dartmouth is no longer on the board, like Sam Darnold temporarily when Rob Body popped up. Dartmouth basketball emerging. I think they popped onto the scene in 2023. So I think that was a big story of ours at the end of last year. But disappearing within the calendar year of 2024, that was not on my bingo card. Amanda seemingly predicted it, but that was not on a bingo card at the start of 2024. I think that's another big story that people maybe missed during the holiday season, but another very big one in our college sports space.
Yeah, big time. It was interesting, obviously, the timing of that, that I more, I guess, throw to you in terms of, do you think that the timing was, thought of previously, or just that they're kind of preparing for, I guess, in about 2 weeks, the Trump administration coming in. I guess that's more of the timing. But yeah, it was interesting, kind of just got thrown under the rug, at least I saw, coming out, New Year's Eve from reading these articles. So yeah, it's interesting. Dartmouth being able to unionize, isn't the choice isn't too surprising to me, just with following Amanda. She seems like she's real in the weeds, or at least, in a little bit more of those conversations. Great follow on Twitter when it comes to this stuff, especially. It's been a close follow with how this next administration is going to come in and really shake it up. Because, not a political podcast, not a political statement, but it is just, employee rights and employee everything is at the forefront of the next administration. So, I think this will definitely not be the end, maybe for Dartmouth, but not the end of, the union conversation for these collegiate athletes.
Mike, I think that's a good note to end it on. We welcome all the new listeners of Conduct. We appreciate all the OG listeners. We appreciate all the diehard 50%. Listeners. I saw that.
50% of our listeners.
We appreciate the diehard listeners also that were very quick to tell me the episode that you loaded that was unedited. Do you remember that fun fiasco?
Of course.
What was that, a Thursday night football? There was some Jets game, right?
Yeah, so I went to the Jets game on Thursday night, Jets God. Patriots. Yep. Yeah, it was tough.
Why don't you tell that? Why don't we tell that story? We didn't do it on the podcast. We're now, like, the statute of limitations passed. I have your back always, but why don't we tell that story? I think that's a fun one to end the podcast on.
Yeah, I edited the podcast completely fine. And yeah, I upload the file and schedule it out to be up and everything. And I ended up uploading the wrong file. So ended up uploading the raw file rather than the edited file. So none of our lovely theme song, no edits. It's just us talking, chopping it up as we do, in between, in the podcast world. Many people maybe don't know that, we do have little segments that we talk off of, off of just the podcast. And yeah, so that made it live on air. And I got to the Jet game probably around noonish, 1 o'clock. Yeah, probably around noon, 1 o'clock. And yeah, we were having a conversation. You're like, yeah, sent it over, and people were letting you know. This is unedited, so
that's the only blemish in your illustrious career as executive producer of this podcast. I had played a very late game of poker that night, so normally I listen to the podcast first thing in the morning, just catch little things, and sometimes I'll tweak the episode title. Yeah, that day I didn't do it, and then that was a fun barrage of texts that were coming. It's pretty cool, the friends of mine that don't tell me they listen to the podcast and then reaching out. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Whatever doesn't kill you makes us stronger. And it didn't kill the podcast. The podcast still existed. And guess what? We're stronger for it, Mike. And you're the best. Okay. So let's end on this. We can talk about some stuff, what to watch for. And I guess we'll do some personal stuff, some sports law resolutions that you all can hold us to. What to watch for, Mike? I watched the Aaron Rodgers docuseries on Netflix. I think it's interesting, the first episode about his career and whatnot. Episodes 2 and 3, he's just a loon. He's just a man that has lost his mind, and his career has kind of gone up in flames since he came to New York, our city. And I just feel bad for the guy. Like, it wasn't a good watch. It was just like, this guy is an enigma, is the name of the docuseries. I felt more bad for him. Like, he definitely did this Netflix doc thinking he would have this huge comeback year, and like, he's not good. I think there was a chance he might not be on the Jets next year. So this is going to be a weird, capsule in time that they recorded this. Like, I think there was a chance he almost became vice presidential candidate, to RFK Jr. It's just a snapshot in time of like, why did this documentary happen? And, 5 years from now, this documentary is going to be so irrelevant. So I think right now is probably a good time to watch it. Mike, have you tortured yourself and hate watched it yet?
Well, yeah, you're not going to love. I will not be hate watching it. I'm still a big Aaron Rodgers fan. So, yeah, I'll say that
You're
on the podcast.
Aaron Rodgers fan?
I do. I am a fan of Aaron Rodgers. I don't hate him after this season, and I got to watch the documentary.
Hold on.
But
hold on.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of, so when I told you he's a loon, you're like, oh no, he's not a loon. He's a genius. Man's a genius.
No. Well, that's the thing. I got to give you a pause there. He's definitely out there. There's no doubt about it. A lot of this stuff, I don't fully agree with everything he said. It's just, he's putting up some of the best numbers that I've ever seen in my life as a Jets quarterback. So that should tell you something. A lot of the stuff around him, it was set up for fail here, in my opinion.
No, it was not. And what Aaron Rodgers defender? How did it take me basically the entirety of 2024 to realize your hottest take of the year, that you're an Aaron Rodgers defender? What's wrong with you?
I just think he was set up to fail in a system with arguably the worst owner in sports, and firing the coach 5 games in, and I just think it was a mess. I think he's absolutely at fault for a significant portion of it. I am not saying clearing his name in any completely. It's just, I think that there's a little bit overemphasis of how bad he's been this year when you have, quarterback play across the league has just been horrific.
Let me ask you this. What was the Jets record last year, Mike, as a Jets fan?
Yeah.
No, John, it's a question.
It's not an enjoyable season. Yeah, 7-9, whatever.
What's the Jets record this year?
This is what happens when you eliminate the entire defensive line.
Mr.
You
Krivchenko.
Fire your coach week 5. I'm letting you know the reasons.
Answer the question.
They'll be 4-13 after this next week, probably.
Okay.
And they lost 3 games going from Zach Wilson to Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
Hilarious. But the context matters.
No, it doesn't. It was set up perfectly for Aaron Rodgers. They're basically a quarterback away from being, pre-sell-off firing, a quarterback away from having a really good team, and he didn't do it. Anyway, I don't mean to divulge. And you and my are New York, so that's all I hear about is Aaron Rodgers. But listen, I guess what to watch for is the rising of from the ashes, the rising of the phoenix that is Aaron Rodgers and his Jets career. You're predicting a comeback season in 2025? the 2025 comeback player of the year, Aaron Rodgers?
That I will not stretch, but I don't think that he will be gone, is my opinion.
Okay. I think he'll be there because they've hitched him to their wagon, and Woody's going to stick around for another year, but it's horrendous. Okay. Some big personal stuff. I alluded to it. Obviously published a book, College Sports in a Nutshell, in 2024, which is pretty cool. The documentary I filmed a couple of years ago, The Spoils, kind of came out. So it was my second sports documentary that I was a part of, which is pretty sweet. And then every once in a while, something cool happens. New York Post ran with my quote on the Tyson versus Paul fight. And I'm still getting emails from totally normal people that want to be plaintiffs in this lawsuit that I am not pursuing because I'm not a class action lawyer. So maybe at some point I will be. But yeah, still getting crazy emails still. So that was probably my most viral thing in I don't know, the history of sports law lust. So that was pretty cool. So shout out to folks, shout out to all of you for getting that thing on the viral campaign. And I think, Mike, for you've been a very big part of Conduct Detrimental. 3 big things that we did this year. We did the second installment of the 10 Under 10 series. That is now, it's been out for a couple months. We did the Conduct Detrimental Sports Law Symposium, which I think is in its 3rd year. You and Bryce Goodwin were monumental in doing that. And we have not announced it yet, but the second installment of the Sports Law Writing Competition, Mike, second or third? Second, right?
Second. Yep.
We have told the winners that they have won. So if we did not tell you yet, we have bad news that you did not win. But it is cool that we have this much support for this writing competition. So I know as a hungry law student and a young lawyer, I would die for something like this. We are going to make sure we give a lot of publicity to the winners. And if you didn't win, you can feel free to use your submission anywhere you want. We'll find ways to publish it. If you want to publish on the website, by all means. We had a lot of good submissions. Just you have to have a certain amount of winners. And we designate a certain amount of money for the trophies and all that fun stuff. But everyone's winners in our book. If you publish something on sports law and you like the juices of writing, by all means, we have the website up, and we have people publishing still on the website. I was going through our archives, Mike. I used to be very big at finding writers and going out and recruiting people to write for the site. I'll try to do more of that in 2025. Maybe I'll enlist some of our people on the website to help do that. But yeah, I think it's a really great resource if you're a listener of the podcast and you want to start building your own sports law network to get your name out. There's no better way to do it than writing. That's how I got my start. That's how a lot of my contemporaries get their start. So that is the focus of the website, just for people to write and people have places, jobs to look for. We have our jobs report that we do. But anyway, Mike, I'm rambling. That's it. Pretty successful year. And yeah, I'm happy that you've been my co-pilot throughout the process, my man.
No, I'm thankful. Yeah, forever blessed to do this. So yeah, anyone that's listening that's also a young lawyer or in school, all I did was reach out to Dan, had a specialty, I guess, because I could edit and, had those skill sets. So if you have stuff like that, definitely reach out to us. Opportunities are there. So
yeah, just got to reach out to me on the right day. And if I don't answer, follow up on your follow-ups on your follow-ups. That's really the general lesson of life. You just got to be right place, right time. And if you don't succeed, you try and try again. The main people in our conduct circle know that I get pretty busy with kids and coaching and teaching and all the other crap I do. So if you really you want to break through, you got to have some follow-up, and I always appreciate it. Okay. Now, you know what that noise is, Mike? Did you hear that noise?
the kids.
That's children banging on the door, children scratching at the door. This means that I am in need. So I have to take off this nice little Union College 2014 national champion shirt I have. You saw this?
Yeah, from what? Hockey?
From Union College winning the Division I National Hockey Championship.
Nice. I'm
surprised you didn't know
I had
that.
no idea about it.
You got to take
I
this
had no
hat
idea.
off.
2014, I was 15. I have no idea.
You're very young. I'm old. I'm an old person. So it's nice 36 years of life on this earth. I appreciate every minute that I have this podcast, this platform to share with you all. And wishing you all a very happy and healthy new year. According to Larry David, this is the last day, the third, that I can wish you all a happy new year. And we made it. the official recap episode. Mike, appreciate you very much from all of us here at Conduct Detrimental. Wishing you all a very happy and healthy New Year, and we'll see you next time on another episode of the Sports Law Podcast, Conduct Detrimental.